Big divides and differences became the overwhelming theme at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi, with consensus on critical issues elusive at best. The G20 Foreign Ministers meeting comes amid fractured East-West relations over the conflict in Ukraine and an assertive China. Consensus was achieved on over 90% of issues, which were reflected on the document, outcome document that is. No joint communique was released.
Of the issues which concern especially the global south, the developing countries. There was a considerable meeting of minds, and a considerable meeting of minds which has been captured by the outcome document.
Russia and China jointly criticized the West. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the West is now isolating itself. And although the West represents itself as the beacon of democracy, it keeps on bullying other regions. Lavrov also said that Moscow respects New Delhi's stance over the Ukraine conflict.
Excellencies, may we all please rise.
With him, they say that Russia should face a strategic defeat, that allegedly it is an existential problem for the West. They stated explicitly, they don't conceal it. They would like the attempt to preserve the hegemony on world arena.
And today, when addressing the participants of the foreign minister meeting, President Modi, I think he presented balanced and responsible position of the country as the president of the G20.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, on the sidelines of the G20 and had a 10-minute chat. Blinken urged Russia to reverse its position on the nuclear pact, the New START Treaty, and called for the release of U.S. national Paul Whelan. In this rare meeting, Blinken also underscored U.S. support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Antony Blinken reiterated that the G20 has again been marred by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He further urged member states to call on Russia to withdraw its forces, as India spared no effort to bridge the rift.
We may not always be of one mind. In fact, there are some matters of sharp differences of opinions and views. Yet, we must find common ground and provide direction, because that is what the world expects of us. As G20 foreign ministers, we can send a collective message affirming our determination to address the complex challenges that we face at this juncture.
India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar also held bilateral discussions with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Meanwhile, meetings were also held between representatives of other nations. While answering a question asked by WION's diplomatic correspondent Siddhan Sabal about his meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister, Jaishankar said the talks were about the current state of India-China relationship, which he described as being quote-unquote abnormal.
Number of issues on which there was agreement.
Well, for more on this, a foreign policy analyst, Edward P. Joseph, senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on WION on this very busy news day. And, you know, G20 member states, their foreign ministers all gathered in New Delhi, but it seems like they really couldn't reach a consensus at the end of the day on all of the issues, despite the fact that they did achieve something on over 90% of the issues that they talked about. And this was reflected on the quote-unquote outcome document. Can you tell us what this means?
Yes, Susan, good to be with you. Your point is quite significant. What we see here is that it's not true that as some have suggested, that the war in Ukraine, in particular the Western position, the U.S., EU, NATO position on it, and sanctions on Russia, which again, come in response to Russia's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. It's not true that this, quote, holds everything else hostage. So that narrative was disproved skillfully, I believe, by the chairmanship by Prime Minister Modi here, and it's simply not the case that that because the West in particular has taken a very tough and principled stand against Russian aggression, backed up by the UN General Assembly. It's not true. This Russian and Chinese narrative that, oh my gosh, this is holding everything hostage. Not true. Under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Modi, there was ample progress and agreement and consensus on, as you mentioned, the vast majority of issues. Where they diverge is, of course, on the question of Russian aggression against Ukraine, backed by China, and the concerns of India and many other countries about inflation, about the impact on food prices. The answer to this is very simple. Unity against Russian aggression, the isolation of Russia, is what will advance Moscow towards serious peace talks and an ending to this terrible war and the terrible suffering of the Ukrainian people and the impact on global economies. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, some believe that how unified the West can stand and how many more countries it can bring on its side as we enter this second year of war will ultimately determine who will come out on top and how this war will end. Do you agree with that, considering the fact that one U.S. administration official told reporters after Secretary Blinken met with Lavrov that that Lavrov didn't seem to really care that Anthony Blinken said that, we will stick to the very end with the Ukrainians?
Yes, I think your analysis is accurate here. We see this meeting, which demonstrated and should be seen, this meeting of Secretary Blinken of reaching out and showing the willingness to speak to his counterpart, Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia, showed the U.S. is keeping the communications channels open, and that means anytime Russia wants to stop its aggression and discuss its security concerns or other concerns, it means it has a counterpart in the United States. That's the signal here. So no one should say, oh, the U.S. is just piling weapons in Ukraine and the U.S. is just escalating the war. That's not true. The U.S. reluctantly and its NATO allies provide these weapons because they have to. Because if they do not provide the weapons, then Russian aggression prevails. And again, I have to emphasize here to all your viewers that there's no debate about this war and on whose side. There's no question of, well, it's a complicated. It's not. The UN General Assembly 1 year ago this month and repeated it several times has voted, initially a vote of 141 to 5. That this is Russian aggression against Ukraine. And the signal to Lavrov from Secretary Blinken was, yes, the U.S. is going to support Ukraine and along with its NATO allies, European Union partners, as long as it takes. And I should point out there are partners in Asia as well, South Korea, Japan, that are also quite strongly committed. They recognize the threat that this represents if Russia prevails. They recognize the threats in Asia if Russia prevails. What the impact would be on China, Chinese aggression against Taiwan, and not just Taiwan, against India itself, if Russia were to prevail, backed by China in this aggressive effort against Ukraine. And so that was the message conveyed to Foreign Minister Lavrov, and he can choose to receive it and convey it back to President Putin if he likes. But the U.S. is there. Blinken has signaled the U.S. is there to discuss other important issues, such as this, the START treaty, the question of the unfair arrests of U.S. citizens like Paul Whelan. Those were also conveyed to Foreign Minister Lavrov. But the key point, you hit the nail on the head, is global unity on this. The more unity there is about Russian aggression, the better it is for the citizens of the world who are suffering from high food prices and other impacts from this terrible aggression. Please.
Thank you so much for that analysis, Edward P. Joseph. We look forward to speaking to you again very soon on WION.